The nation is in a budget crisis, and there seems to be no end to the debt. Among the spending, there are millions of dollars being wasted on the death penalty when it really hasn't proven to be worth the higher cost than other forms of punishment. Why not save the money and not add to the debt? My name is Julia Straszewski, and my argument topic is the death penalty. My major claim is that the death penalty is an ineffective form of punishment, and terms I'd like to clear up are effective and efficient. Effective means that the topic in question is adequate to accomplish a certain purpose, and efficient is acting effectively without waste of time, effort, or money. And these definitions are given by dictionary.com. And as you can see, efficient and effective go hand in hand. In order for it to be effective, it would have to be efficient. For example, cost efficient. If you spend more money than you should on a certain thing, you are not spending efficiently. To be cost efficient, you should spend the least amount of money per convict while deterring crime effectively. And the death penalty does not do that. And subclaims that do support that are, 1, that the death penalty is costly to taxpayers, and 2, that the death penalty does not deter crime more than other forms of punishment. So we'll begin with the first one, that it is very costly to taxpayers nationwide. A quote from BBC that did a study on the United States death penalty states, in New York, since the death penalty was reinstated in 1995, the costs for each person condemned to death were approximately $23 million. Another quote in support by the Metropolitan Greater Oakland Democratic Club states, it costs more to execute a person than to keep him or her in prison for life. A 1993 California study argues that each death penalty costs at least $1.25 million more than a regular murder case with a life sentence without parole. And yet another website says, the death penalty official website says, the California death penalty costs taxpayers more than $14 million per year beyond the cost of keeping convicts locked up for life. So in other words, millions and millions of dollars are being spent on something that really isn't proven to be more effective than life in prison. Coast to coast, it is very expensive. As you saw, from New York to California, you are spending a lot of money. So that brings me to my second claim that says that the death penalty does not deter crime more than other forms of punishment. The BBC in that same study says, the research has failed to provide scientific evidence that executions have a greater deterrent effect than imprisonment. Such proof is unlikely forthcoming, and the evidence as a whole still gives no positive support to the deterrent hypothesis. And the official death penalty website has many charts on it, and one of which shows the murder rates of all the 50 states. And they show that 25 states support the death penalty and the other 15 do not. And in that chart about the murder rates, the top 22 states, murder rates were held by states with the death penalty, which means, like, even though they have such a high severe punishment, people aren't less likely to perform murder crimes, even if they do have the death penalty. And that same website offered a quote that says, according to a survey of the former and present presidents of the country's top academic criminological societies, 88% of the experts rejected the notion that death penalty acts as a deterrent to murder. And that quote was from 2009, which means it's very recent information. And the BBC and the actual official death penalty website are very reliable resources that are widely known, so it's safe to trust the information they're giving us. So the death penalty has proven to be an ineffective form of punishment. It is not cost efficient. It does not deter crime more than the life imprisonment, which is more cost effective and therefore is ineffective. The death penalty offers little to gain at a very high price. As an audience member, you would be wise to agree that the death penalty is an ineffective form of punishment.
All right, Julia, the proposition's clearly stated. You set up what your two secondary points are going to be. You've got this definition of what is effective and efficacy and the way they're connected to each other. I do think that you need to discuss whether or not there are arguments on the other side about what efficiency and efficacy might entail, because you've basically limited it to cost and deterrence issues. There may in fact be other functions that the death penalty does efficiently do that are not measurable in the quantifiable numbers that you're talking about. And so I know that you're trying to focus on the factual issues. Sometimes the real disputes are on some of the other issues, but I think you've got plenty of stuff to argue about here. On the cost issue, I'm not sure if you read the numbers correctly or if I heard them correctly or if they are so dramatically different, but it sounds to me like New York State, it's $23 million for one person to be sentenced, and in California it's $2.2 million for a person to be sentenced. We don't have any execution costs being talked about, just the prosecution and the sentencing, and I'm not exactly sure why it is that those costs, from the presentation that you give, why it is that those costs are so excessive. I think you need to have an explanation of what differentiates those costs to some degree. Also, you need to tell us what the consequence of those costs are. Now, I don't mean to suggest that $14 million isn't a lot of money. In my world, it would be a substantial amount of money. But in the state of California, the $14 million difference that you're talking about would probably not pay for this school to run, for a month, much less the whole state. So the $14 million in terms of total amount, I think it seems relatively small. What you need to do is you need to show, for instance, that there's a consequence to budgets in, especially law enforcement, being strapped. If we're spending our money this way, what are we not spending our money on in law enforcement that might be more efficient and more efficacious? And I think that's where that comparison would be a little bit stronger. You did a nice job trying to qualify your evidence and explain why it's trustworthy. It does seem to be a little bit conclusionary instead of looking at particular studies that didn't find the relationship. We just got a conclusionary statement, and then we've got a survey of experts, and we're supposed to rely on the consensus of opinion on that. And I think that you're probably a little bit better off using some particular studies and citing them so that we can see where the clash is. Otherwise, it stays very general. The presentation needs to be a little bit smoother, but it was clear what you were saying, and I thought you had a nice summary and exit line. All right. Thank you.